With so many African countries, movements being restricted, let's clear something up immediately. When people hear that a country is not banned, they assume freedom, they assume access, they assume fairness. But for African countries, not being banned does not mean being free. It means being placed in a lower tier of control where movement is allowed conditionally, under surveillance, with the door always half closed. In the last episode, we broke down which African countries are banned or restricted, and the overstay numbers being used to justify it. Today, we're asking the deeper question: why are these so-called non-restricted African countries still tightly controlled? And remember, if you want more Africa First stories the Western media ignores, hit subscribe. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth behind them. And by the end of this video, you should understand how mobility control works as an oppressive system and why restricting African movement is really about preventing African advancement. So not banned does not mean free. It means conditional.
Citizens are banned from entering the US. Three of the African countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, have been classified as posing significant national security risk due to the presence of armed extremist groups. These countries form the Alliance of Sahel States and in recent years have distanced themselves from Western allies. South Sudan has also been flagged for security concerns. Sierra Leone was previously subject to partial restrictions but has now been upgraded to a full ban. 15 additional countries around the world have been added to the list of countries facing partial restrictions. The vast majority, 12 of them, are in Africa. The restrictions on these countries are primarily due to what the US says are high visa overstay risk, lack of passport control, and inefficiencies in civil documentation systems.
All right, so let's talk about the illusion of access, right? So let's talk about the countries that people point to and say, see, they're not restricted. Morocco, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa. On paper, these countries are not under blanket bans, but in practice, their citizens still face high denial rates, aggressive intent to return policing, extreme financial proof requirements, or heavy scrutiny of marriage and family reunification. Because the system doesn't ask, are you banned? It asks, what role do you serve? And that's where the control begins. So what we're often told is that visa systems are neutral, that borders are about security, that migration control is administrative. So here's how it actually works, the truth, right? Europe and global north no longer stop African migration primarily at their own borders. They externalize that control. So instead of stopping Africans in Europe, they stop Africans inside of Africa. And this is where Arab gatekeeper states come into play. So countries like Morocco and Egypt sit between indigenous Africa and Europe or the Gulf slash Arabian Peninsula. They function as buffer zones. So Morocco operates as Europe's southern border. So-called sub-Saharan Africans are intercepted, redirected, or detained before they ever reach Spain or the Schengen zone. And Egypt plays a parallel role on the eastern corridor. So it restricts movement from East and Central Africa toward the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, or Gulf labor markets. So African migrants are blocked not just from Europe, but they're blocked from Arabia as well, long before destination states ever have to say no. So this is outsourced border enforcement. So again, these Arab gatekeeper states are incentivized with investment, trade access, debt relief, diplomatic protection. In exchange, they help maintain a global mobility hierarchy where European movement is assumed to be legitimate, Arab elite movement is selectively privileged, and indigenous African movement is treated as a risk to be contained. So this is definitely a systematic oppression without the word race being used because the outcome is consistent. African bodies are filtered, African families are delayed, African wealth is capped. No racial language is required. The system reproduces racial hierarchy on its own. So when Africans are stopped inside Africa so others can stay open, that's hierarchy, not policy, right? So here's what this actually blocks, right? So-called remittances, Africa's independent capital, remittances are one of Africa's largest sources of income, larger than aid, right? Which technically remittances are investments, and investments is what Europeans call their money when it flows back to Europe, and then they call ours remittances. But remittances here, we'll say, are unconditional. They bypass IMF rules. They strengthen families directly. So when they restrict movement, they restrict earning, and restricting earning caps remittances, and then mobility control becomes capital control. So another aspect of this is marriage and family formation. So African marriages are treated as fraud risks, loopholes, demographic threats. So family reunification visas face higher denial, longer delays, invasive proof standards. Meanwhile, Europeans marry, settle, and live across Africa freely. That asymmetry is structural, not accidental. So here's the overstay logic that equals a collective punishment, right? When Europeans overstay, it's considered individual. When Africans overstay, it becomes a national statistic, a restriction list, a punishment for millions. That is group-based governance, right? So when it comes to resources and investments, we'll have to look at who benefits. So look at where Western and European investments go. They go right to the ports, pipelines, energy corridors, border technology, transit hubs, and it prioritizes movement of goods and not people. So Europeans live freely in North Africa, right? Owning property, running businesses, retiring long-term. Africans receive no reciprocal access, and goods move freely, capital moves freely, but Africans are inspected. And I'd like to extend that to throughout Africa, not just in the northern portions, right? So we have to look at Africa's strategic reality. So Africa's long-term challenge isn't borders. It's being contained by other people's borders, right? So that's why the future is intra-African mobility, African passport power, continental remittance systems, regional family freedom. So Africa doesn't need permission, it needs mobility sovereignty. So here's a final truth that I'd like to lay on you. A system that blocks African movement blocks African futures. So, mashallah, that's your African Insight for today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because I'm Mr. Empower TV. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth behind them. This is Mr. Empower, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.